Welcome to the program, friend. President Trump, President Putin, meeting in Helsinki, and yea, verily, the fake news people still trying to drive an agenda, but don't worry. The adults in the room will prevail. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance. The piranhas in the media, they can't help themselves. Even while President Trump and President Putin are meeting to discuss Crimea, to discuss nuclear weapons, to discuss Syria. The first time that the two of them emerge, what does the press want to talk about? Meddling in the American election. Will the Russians extradite the 12 people that Robert Mueller just so happened to indict 3 or 4 days before the meeting? Does the president of Russia have compromising material on President Trump from when President Trump was there as a private citizen? It was actually fun in the sense of Ronald Reagan meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev was fun. It was fun to see the leaders of the two largest nuclear superpowers talking, looking for ways to work together where we can, dealing with differences. And then it became the normal, pathetic media circus. And one of the reasons that this distresses me so much is because the press did not deal with substantive issues during the Obama administration. When the Obama administration was in power, they screwed up with Russia, they screwed up with Iran. Obama assured us that there was nothing happening with Russia and the Americans. Obama did nothing for the Crimeans, did nothing for the Ukrainians, did nothing to stop ISIS. And yet the press did not cover the substance, the substantive issues at play there. They fawned all over Obama. He could do no wrong. Now President Trump is president. And rather than focus on the substantive issues, they still want to talk about the things that don't matter, like they did with Obama, but because they agreed with Obama's ethics, they were willing to paint him as this grand prince of a man, which he wasn't. And because of President Trump's policies about child killing, about Second Amendment, about putting American workers first, about stopping the influx of potential Muslim terrorists, because of his policies, they're not focusing on those policies, they're focusing on personal attacks. Asking the president of Russia, does he have a dossier of compromising material on President Trump, coming from an Associated Press reporter? It's mind-boggling. It's not good journalism. It's not the things that affect the way we live day in and day out. Now, I understand that the theory would be if they did have a dossier on Trump showing some heinous thing that he did when he was in Russia, then President Putin could use that to blackmail Trump. Say, you know, we'd hate to let these pictures come out. We'd hate to let the recordings of these phone calls come out. So let's just talk about your reaction to our annexation of Crimea. Let's talk about what you're going to do or not do in Syria. So I get it. But I don't think that something like that exists. What we do know is that Hillary Clinton has 33,000 emails unaccounted for. We do know that she had a sloppy server that may well have been hacked by the Russians. We do know that there was collusion with some low-level Russian agents preparing a false dossier, which is the foundation of the whole Mueller investigation. We do know those things. So the question is, does anybody really believe that Vladimir Putin was sitting back there pulling strings to try and influence an election in the United States? I personally have a hard time believing it. I mean, maybe they would want Americans to hate Americans. I don't know. But Hillary Clinton would have been a lot softer with Russia than Trump is. Now, Putin said in his one of his statements that he wanted Trump to win the election because he said that he wanted to get back to a normal relationship with Russia. So Maybe he did want President Trump to win. He said he did. If he wanted that, then he got what he wanted. But that would have been on his self-interest as the leader of Russia. It's in Putin's interest to deal with an American president who wants things to go as smoothly as these two former enemies. And that's what I think we are at this point, former enemies. We have a much greater threat in Islam. Both of us, both the Americans and the Russians, have a much greater threat in Islam and Islamic terrorism than we do in each other. Because whether anyone wants to believe it or not, or say it out loud or not, the old Cold War doctrine of mutually assured destruction is still in place when it comes to America and Russia. We both have nuclear weapons pointed at each other's capitals, and if one capital is destroyed, both capitals will be destroyed, and nobody wants to see a nuclear war at that level, or really at any level. So I'm glad that they're meeting. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of the meetings, but at the end of the day, it appears to me that most of the press pools that are over there are just obsessed with this narrative that President Trump was colluding with the Russians before the election so that he could win. It's ludicrous. I've got to take a break. Don't go away. Warrior Guitars. Without question, the best guitar I've ever played, heard, or seen is a Warrior. The owner of Warrior, Jay Dran, has an incredible testimony of redemption and healing. God gave him the vision to start Warrior Guitars and a passion to make the best guitars in the world. They only make about 120 guitars a year, each one by hand. Maybe one of them could be yours, or a once-in-a-lifetime gift for someone you love.
The one thing that I can tell you is this is the most finely crafted guitar I have ever held. I've played a lot of guitars, I own a lot of guitars, and although the quality is exceptional on all of them, this is by far the most finely crafted instrument I own or have ever played. And I'm glad I own it.
Contact my friends at Warrior Guitar. Tell them Randall Terry sent you. Before President Trump went to meet with President Putin, he visited with some NATO allies. And as you know, if you've been following the news, he stirred up the dust. And the Germans are just outraged that President Trump is saying to them, hey, are you going to pull your fair share in NATO? And Prime Minister May's people, some of them are upset because President Trump criticized her inability to negotiate her way out of the European Union, the whole Brexit discussion. Again, one thing that the press doesn't get, the mainstream media, with the exception perhaps of Fox, they don't seem to understand. President Trump is actually looking out for the welfare of the American people. When he helps to reopen coal mines and steel mills and put in the Keystone Pipeline, all of which are anathema to hardcore left-wingers, okay? Who do you think he's trying to help? He's not doing it for himself. And this is something that we need to focus on for a minute. Most big business deals, whether it was NAFTA or giving China permanent most favored nation status, those deals were not for the average American. They were for the average millionaire and billionaire who had something to gain. And this is often hard for us to really come to grips with. Look at the bailout in 2008, okay? Go back 10 years. Billions and billions and billions of taxpayer money was given, billions were given, to the banks, Citicorp, you name it, just go down the list, Merrill Lynch. And after they got billions of our dollars, they gave not millions, but billions well over 10 billion from what I just was looking at, in bonuses to their employees. One bank gave $3.6 billion to their employees. Citicorp, I believe it was. Now, this is not their money. They were failing. Their bank was failing because of bad business decisions. The government bailed them out, which means that my money, your money, bailed them out. And then to insult us, to slap us in the face, I don't even know, to pad their own pockets, they turned around and gave over 700 of their employees at least $1 million each as a bonus for a failing institution. They didn't give their own money. They gave our money. Now, that's not looking out for the interests of the American people. That deal was cut to protect billionaires. NAFTA, the jobs went away. Ross Perot was right. That giant sucking sound you hear to the south of our border are American jobs going away. He was right. China and NAFTA have all but destroyed the American manufacturing infrastructure. So President Trump goes to Europe and he says, hey guys, we're in NATO. We're carrying the bulk of the financial burden. Why aren't you giving your fair share? Why aren't you giving money to NATO? You're using your money for your socialist programs in your countries. Our taxpayers, the American taxpayers, are the ones that are funding NATO so that what? So that the governments that we're protecting with our military and with our money, so that they can give money away to their citizens in their socialist programs. So in a very real way, American taxpayers are funding European socialism. Because if they were putting in their fair share for NATO, for the mutual defense of the countries against the threat of Russia, if they were putting in their fair share, they probably wouldn't have as much money to give away as boondoggles in their socialist programs to their own citizens. And so ultimately, we're paying the little swapping of the dollar, we're paying not just for socialist programs in America, we're paying for socialist programs in Europe. And if that doesn't disturb you, even make your blood boil a little bit, then I've got a bridge I would like to sell you. I'll be right back. Have Muslim terrorists hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam? Or is there more to the story? The answer lies in the life of one man, Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Muslim terrorists see themselves inside a 1,400-year-old story, a narrative that focuses on specific events in the life of Muhammad. We are going to look at Muhammad's life using their most sacred literature. We will look at Muhammad at the Battle of Badr. We'll see him deal with those who mock him. We'll see the times when he used deception. We'll witness Muhammad's anti-Semitism. And yes, we will discuss Muhammad and his teachings concerning sex, slavery, and jihad. Friend, if you want to understand Islamic terrorism, get this series today. Welcome back, friend. So President Trump meeting successfully with Vladimir Putin. It's in our interests, in America's interest, to get along with Russia as much as possible. And by the way, we're not dealing with the Soviet Union anymore. I remember as a young man following the news intensely about vicious persecution against Christians in Russia. That is nothing. It is nothing like it used to be. Nothing. About the absence of a free press in Russia. Russia now does have a free press. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that they are persecuting media people who say things that the government doesn't like, but it's still not the Soviet era. It's still not like Vladimir Lenin or Joseph Stalin. It's just not. So is Russia as free as America? Clearly it's not. But is Russia way more free than it was during the Soviet era? Absolutely. And they have free elections. And they have President Putin as their president. And he is a really popular president in Russia by all standards. He's still a man. He's still a human being. Trump is still a man. Trump is still a human being. The question is, what can we do to get along so that we don't get into a hot war with Russia? And I don't think that there's one in the offing, but President Trump, when he goes over there and he talks to President Putin, or then he criticizes Merkel for cutting a multi-billion-dollar deal with Russia concerning gas, and then turns around and says, wait a minute, is Russia your friend or your enemy? Are you nervous about Russia? Do you need NATO to protect you from Russia? Or are you just in bed with them and you're cutting all kinds of economic deals while we protect you with our military and pay for it with our tax money? It's almost crazy to me that President Trump is being criticized for these decisions and these statements that he's making. It's mind-boggling to me. But what it shows is that the media is in bed with big business way more than they would like to think. Because if the media really wanted to focus on corruption, they would not be focusing on whether or not President Trump colluded with the Russians, because clearly that's not true. There's no evidence after a year and a half of this nonsense. Because the reason there's no evidence is because it didn't happen. There is no evidence because it didn't happen. But the media would rather focus on that than on the real burden that American taxpayers are paying to keep NATO afloat, while Germany is cutting multi-billion-dollar deals with their horrible enemy, Russia. They would be focusing on whether or not Theresa May honored her commitment to get England out of the European Union. They would be focusing on the threat to liberty that the influx of Muslim immigrants means to Europe. They would be focusing on the terrorist aspects of the Muslim communities that are emerging inside of England, inside of France, inside of Germany. They'd be focusing on the rape rate that has skyrocketed in those areas that are dominated by Muslim immigrants. They would focus on that, but they're not interested in that. Why? Because they don't care about the things that you and I care about. They don't care about the things that really matter. They want President Trump out. They don't want Trump to be picking Supreme Court judges. They don't want Trump to move America towards energy independence. They don't want the European Union to come apart because they're funded, they're paid. And this is where I don't know the motivation of journalists. What I do know is that these massive corporations that deliver our news to us today, that they have an economic interest in the status quo, okay? They want things to remain as they are. And the people that have become fabulously wealthy by the closure of American steel mills and the closure of American coal mines and the closure of American plants are the people who are at the top of the economic food chain, and they don't care about the American little guy. Because if they did care about the American little guy, they would not have sent the jobs of the American little guy overseas or to Mexico or to some other country south of the border. That's where the proof is in the pudding. They don't care, and they show that they don't care by where they send our jobs. And in the banking industry, they don't care about the little guy because they show the contempt they have when they give out multi-billion-dollar bonuses with taxpayer money. I've got to take a break. I'll be right back. What Would Mohammed Do? Islamic Terrorism Explained is the best movie series documentary ever produced on the life of Muhammad and Islam. How do I know? Because it's what critics are saying. John Moore, radio host and author, said, "I learned more from What Would Mohammed Do about Islam and Islamic terrorism than I've learned from everything I ever read and watched in my entire life." Friends, this is what the experts are saying. No one has ever done what we've done. I encourage you to get 1, 2, 4 copies. Call 304-289-3700 or order it at the address or the website that you see on the screen. Friend, we have a series that will help you and those you love to have an impact on this country. It's called Insurrecta Nex. That's Latin for revolution against the killing of innocent people. This is the history, the philosophy, and the theology of social revolution in America. We look at the Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of child labor, women's voting rights, the civil rights movement. All of them have this in common: courage, sacrifice, dedication, and in-your-face tactics and rhetoric. That's one of the reasons that we've been losing the culture wars the last 40 years, is because the bad guys are using these tactics and we aren't. We will send you this 14-part TV series along with these manuals for students, a teacher's facilitator guide for only $40. Go to 304-289-3700, 304-289-3700. Did you know that the doctrine of George Washington, the founding president, and the doctrine that existed up until World War II, was that America would not become embroiled in European quarrels? NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In effect, the United States, as the world's largest superpower, dwarfing the combined expenditures of the whole world, we spend about 50% of all the money spent in the world. We spend about half of it on military expenditures. The NATO is about us committing to be entrenched in European matters. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to that. And the reason is because there is a way of life, there is an ethos, there is the idea that we are defending Christendom, as Winston Churchill called it. And for that, I'm glad. I would agree that we could ethically and should ethically keep the Russians from invading Christian nations and imposing a totalitarian state on them. Just like I believe that we should stop the totalitarian system of Islam from encroaching into Europe. I think that Turkey is a threat to Europe. President Trump is trying, with whatever foibles he has as a man, but he is trying to put America first. He's trying to have it both ways. To say, look, we're America. I'm the president of America. I'm not the president of NATO. I'm not the president of the European Union. I'm the president of America, and my job as the president of America is to put America first. The media, who are oftentimes left-wingers, one-worlders, people who don't like America, don't love America, they're embarrassed of America, they're ashamed of America, they don't like the strong Christian influence in America, they want to see him fail. They want to see President Trump fail. They want him indicted. They want him impeached. They want him embarrassed. They want him humiliated. They want him out of office. They want one term. They don't want him appointing Supreme Court judges. They don't want him determining foreign policy. They don't want him resetting the buttons on NAFTA or on China or on bad economic deals that we have with European nations. They don't want it. They don't want energy independence. Why? Because there's something wrong with them. They are the opposite of patriots. It reminds me of that CNN journalist who was ultimately fired, Peter Arnett, who was ultimately fired from CNN because he was so sympathetic to the enemy and he was so against America's interests. All right, I'm about out of time. I ask for your continued prayers. We will be going on the road to hold the feet to the fire of some senators regarding President Trump's appointment to the Supreme Court of Brett Kavanaugh. There is a pro-life Democrat in West Virginia who might be the deciding vote. So God willing, we're going to go to West Virginia and we're going to hold signs in front of his offices that say, confirm President Trump's pick, overturn Roe, abortion is murder. We intend to put some heat where heat can actually make a difference. We might make a stop at one of Mitch McConnell's offices just because he deserves it. I ask you for your prayers for this trip. If you want to help us financially, we'll get some footage of us in action on the road, but you can go to our website, randallterry.com, and help us. God bless you.